why I think Coldplay had to evolve their sound. As it did with Nickelback, it has become the cool hip thing to say you hate Coldplay. Here are some reasons why I think Coldplay are a good band that stands alone in the modern music climate. There are hardly any current bands in the world that can sell out the world's biggest stadiums night after night. I think it's a credit to Chris Martin and the band's songwriting. Coldplay have had the ability to have at least one anthem on all of their albums. However, I think their latest album did struggle a bit to have the same sort of sing-along value of other songs. Chris Martin's songwriting brings people together with easy-to-remember, emotional-filled lyrics. Coldplay's lyrics can move people like Fix You or make you feel happy and joyous, adventure of a lifetime. I think some bands compared to Coldplay can come across as one-dimensional and have very few range of songs in their catalogue. Even in the most recent effort, you can tell the band still attempted to have dynamics in their music and attempted to storytell, unlike, for example, Drake, who tends to use one looping beat with very little dynamics or storytelling. One exception of this is what I think is Coldplay's weakest album, Ghost Stories, that comes across as a very bland album. Coldplay has had to adapt their sound to stay in the mainstream. There are very few bands from the early 2000s that still have the same relevancy and don't sound outdated. As mentioned before, there's very little well-known pop bands that still attempt to use real-sounding instruments when recording and performing. Coldplay clearly tried to make an effort to use instruments such as bass, drums and guitar. Some examples of their most recent quality music ship include the bass line in Adventure of a Lifetime and the solo in Up and Up. I still think sometimes the band could use more real instruments and harmonic sounding guitars in their music, as when they do, it really adds something to the songs. In the age of sampling and using past tracks, Coldplay slightly took a more creative approach. They don't just use samples from other songs. Coldplay brings original sounds to the very heavy sample charts. However, I still think Coldplay's best album was their first, Parachutes. I think some incredible songwriting, creative riffs and some great instruments, for example Shiver, are on the album. But you've got to adapt your sound to stay relevant with the times, to the dismay of some of the early fans. In 2019, the band created their album, Everyday Life, which very few people know about, and didn't gain much commercial success compared to their other albums. Everyday Life is a much mellower album compared to their most recent outgoings, with some great lyrics, and has similarities in ways to Parachutes. The lack of popular support for this album very much shows that the band have had to adapt to be able to still sell out stadiums and keep up with the demands of what the band has grown into. Chris Martin has stated that Coldplay will only make 3 more albums. I hope at least one of these albums goes back to their roots of just using basic instrumentation, for example piano, guitar, bass and drums, as I think the band's best sound is when it's stripped back without the synths and digital sounds.